What is going on, you guys? Welcome back to the channel. Hope you're having a great day, morning, noon, night, whatever it be for you. Hope you're having the best day you could possibly be having right now. And if we're new to the channel, glad to have you here. So, guys, we've been deep diving the Warhammer 40k universe, and we started going down a rabbit hole of the Space Marines. Now, we've talked about the 18 legions that they have. So, one thing occurred to me, a thought: how are these giant 7, 8, 9 foot mofos made? I mean, I know that they got the armor and stuff, but you can't put a little dude inside big armor and it just work. I mean, this ain't Iron Man. So, we're going to be reacting to another fan-made creation for you guys. This is Luton09's Space Marine Creation / Recruitment. Your guide to becoming an Astartes. Don't you want to do that? Another Wardy. What am I saying? Guys, another Warhammer 40k deep dive for your Space Marine creation. Ready? Luton. In the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war. Like I said, that is a big mofo. Can't be no tiny dude inside of that.
They shall be my finest warriors, these men who give themselves to me. Like clay I shall mould them, and in the furnace of war I shall forge them. They shall be of iron will and steely sinew. In great armour I shall clad them, and with the mightiest weapons they shall be armed. They will be untouched by plague or disease, no sickness shall blight them. They shall have such tactics, strategies and machines that no foe will best them in battle. They are my bulwark against the terror. They are the defenders of humanity. They are my Space Marines. And they shall know no fear.
No fear.
Space Marines are humanity's most elite fighting force. They're the defenders of civilization, but their immense power is forged through a harsh selection process, extreme genetic and body modifications. This grueling transformation kills many recruits, and those who do survive it are left arguably barely human. The conversion from weak mortal to demi-godlike superhuman is one gifted to only a tiny amount of humans in the 41st millennium. An Astartes, when his transformation is complete, will be stronger, tougher, mentally more powerful by factors than an ordinary human. And while a Space Marine's prime mission is to protect humanity, their physical disparity from ordinary common humans can actually leave many Astartes to look down on these lesser common humans, while others will feel a renewed sense of dedication to protect those who can barely protect themselves. It's important to remember that Space Marines are the defenders of humanity and not the rulers of it. Humans, for better or worse, have been the leaders of the Imperium of Man until recently with the return of Primaris Marines. While the transformation of a human to Space Marine is complex, you'll often hear the terminology of a gene seed be used. Now, a gene seed is not literally a seed, but it is a specific organ that each Astartes carries with seed-like qualities. It's a term used to describe generally the genetic material of an Astartes. It's more accurately the cells and DNA required to engineer a human into an Astartes. The gene seed, more specifically though, refers to the Space Marines' progenoid glands, and the clue is in the name there when you think of progeny. These organs in a Space Marine respond to the other genetic implants they have and replicate DNA. Essentially, they are, in a manner of speaking, an asexual form of reproduction, which is why when a Space Marine is fatally wounded on a battlefield, an apothecary will fight to recover his gene seed. It's also why, yes, Space Marines do not require heterosexual reproduction. 5 years from implantation, a Space Marine's neck progeny glands can be harvested, but the chest glands won't be harvested up until 10 years. Space Marines essentially depend on themselves to produce new Marines for the chapter. Lastly, in this general sphere of discussion, to answer a very commonly discussed topic, are Space Marines actually castrated? And then, how do they excrete waste? Well, I can't actually recall anywhere in written law this being noted, so if anybody has a specific point of reference, please do link it. But my speculation, based on a few things that I've kind of looked at, is that pretty much the canon opinion is that Space Marines have no sexual drive. However, when it comes to excretion, it's true that their armour is also an environment suit that would cycle and process their own waste, much like a still suit in the Dune universe. Also, Space Marines do not live in their armour, although they may wear it for extended periods of time. It can be removed. It's entirely possible that their external genitals are removed and they have implants to take care of waste, but I've got nothing to see that it points towards this. So it's an unknown, but it's not something that's critically really important in the scheme of things. It's equally possible that it's just seen as an organ as with everything else and they just leave it all be. Now, before we look further into how a Space Marine is forged in the 41st millennium, let's remind ourselves how they were created over history. Now, the first form of Space Marine was originally created by the Emperor during the Unification Wars of the late 30th millennium. Earth at this time was a barren wasteland of scavengers and barbaric warring tribes after civilization had imploded as a result of the Age of Strife. Earth, being cut off from its supply routes in the warp, cannibalized itself and fell into total anarchy. After the Emperor originally created techno-barbarians, a crude adapted form of super soldier, he would form them later into the Thunder Warriors. These warriors were brutal, powerful, and most importantly, highly unstable. The Emperor knew that he wouldn't be able to work with these soldiers forged in the fires of anarchy beyond the unification of Earth's warring tribes, and so he secretly constructed his genetic facilities in a fortress deep below vast mountain ranges on Earth. Here, he would, with some few remaining gene rights, create his Primarchs using his own genetic material as a template. Then subsequently, the very first of the new breed of warriors, the Space Marines, or Astartes. But what are the Thunder Warriors? Imperial records state that the Thunder Warriors were nearly all wiped out during a particularly bloody battle at the end of the Unification Wars on Mount Ararat. Conveniently, the new Legiones Astartes were created readily to replace them. Now, records from this time are understandably fragmented, but described eyewitness accounts from the few Thunder Warriors to survive this battle, like Arcturnus, stated that it was in fact the Emperor himself who massacred the Thunder Warriors. Others have stated that it was also in collaboration with his custodian guard. In several instances that occurred since this time where Thunder Warriors have appeared and faced their Astartes brothers, the Thunder Warriors have nearly always managed to inflict casualties beyond expectation before they are finally felled. This gives some indication of how powerful they were as warriors and why the Emperor felt they were perhaps too dangerous given their power and psychological instability to function as a disciplined fighting and defensive force for the new Imperium. Regardless, this whole situation is a dark and little spoken of episode for the Emperor of Man. Vocalizing these events would no doubt have some Inquisition or ecclesiarchy on their way to you very promptly. With the Thunder Warriors killed in the Battle of Mount Ararat, the new Space Marines, the Legiones Astartes, would come to the fore. Unlike their Thunder Warrior forebears, they would undergo rigorous mental training as well as physical and genetic modifications. This would give them immense physical traits as well as being near unbreakable with their mental conditioning. The new Marines were initially segregated into 20 legions. This separation was not for simple organizational purposes. Each legion was imbued with genetic traits from their Primarch, and as such this impacted their character and behavior. To ensure unity, the Emperor designated them to stay together in their legions to reduce friction and ensure cohesion of the Astartes brothers. Through recruiting and conquest of human colonies as the Imperium expanded, so did the Astartes legions. What had begun as a handful of Marines swelled to tens of thousands during the Crusades. This would lead later to heavy damage caused during the heresy after the Primarchs holding such immense power, being the sole commanders of each Space Marine legion. After that period of chaotic incursion, Robert Guilliman, Primarch of the Ultramarines, would draft the Codex Astartes, and the remaining loyalist Primarchs would, after much consideration, agree at best that the Space Marine legions be split into chapters. This was to ensure no Space Marine Legion could wield the sheer weight of power they had during the Crusades and subsequent heresy. This was known as the Second Founding. Each of these chapters would take a permanent homeworld or fortress monastery in the Imperium. The Codex Astartes states that each chapter would be 1,000 battle brothers in number and manage its own recruitment. A specific development in the creation of a Space Marine was discovered after the Horus Heresy: weaknesses in the gene seed. Now, as I previously explained, the gene seed is the...
Now, guys, I've heard that 1,000 number could be kinda off base, because with like the Black Templars, they're off everywhere and nobody knows their true numbers. So how can they say there's 1,000 per chapter? What do you guys think? Do you think it's higher, lower? I'm going to say probably higher. You don't want to ever let anybody know how many people you got. Alright, let's go. Keep going.
Core biological component in the creation of a Space Marine. During the Heresy, Space Marines were created on a massive scale, and as with any biological replication process, if you do this on a large scale, then mutations and errors can occur in this DNA replication. So another result of the implementation of the Codex Astartes by Guilliman was to slow the process of creating a Space Marine, to more closely monitor their genetic material and the material implanted within new...
Now, guys, when he says mutations, is he kind of referring to like maybe inbreeding kind of style deal? What does he mean? What's the mutations? Are they just angry? Crazy? I don't know. Somebody let me know.
Recruits to ensure purity and expunge defects. Guilliman would also establish core genetic banks on Terra to ensure a stock of genetics existed. These pure sources would provide new material for the foundings of Astartes chapters and also prevent any further contamination.
Smart, I guess.
As previously described, each chapter is responsible for its own replenishment. It chooses where and how to locate potential Space Marine candidates. Many will recruit solely from their own homeworld, but others will reach out to hive worlds of the Imperium to locate powerful and resilient fighters who have shown promise and an unnatural ability in combat, even potentially recruiting from gang fighters in hive cities. Feral planets can also be good for selection, as the humans here are physically tough and have to deal with daily hardships more frequently than some other Imperial planets. Surprisingly, less recruits actually appear from the militaristic worlds like fortress planets, maybe because although knowing lives of military discipline, they haven't endured the true horror and hardships that come from the rougher ends of Imperial life. Any candidate for a Space Marine will be usually young, between the ages of 10 and 15 years old, obviously needing to be strong, healthy and fiercely loyal to the Imperium.
Alright.
Often on worlds where recruitment occurs, young male humans who show exceptional skill or strength are pushed hard to give them the best chance of potential recruitment. Candidates can occasionally be as old as 20, but the full effect of their biological conversions may not be as effective or complete. Standard trials for Space Marine recruitment often involve combat, endurance, perhaps hunting of some extremely dangerous indigenous animal, and for the few who survive the tasks set by the Astartes who are there to supervise, the rewards are beyond estimation. It's difficult to describe just how revered Space Marines are to ordinary citizens of the Imperium. While they wouldn't be directly worshipped, they are certainly individuals with godlike reverence and awe. Many humans in the Imperium will go their entire lives without ever even seeing an Astartes, and they may only arrive on an Imperial planet once in a generation. On some worlds, they are even somewhat mythical. So for a family on an Imperial world to have their son chosen for Space Marine recruitment and candidacy would be an honour beyond imagination. But from some perspectives, bittersweet, in as all likelihood they may never see them again once they have been accepted.
Son, I'm gonna post you on the fridge because you just made me so proud.
And in very high possibility will probably die in later processes. But it's nonetheless the highest honour to serve the Emperor and the Imperium in this way. and would no doubt lead to adulation, even possible special treatment for families after the fact. Ordinary citizens understand that to be accepted for the conversion to the Astartes, the Emperor's chosen warriors, is nothing short of becoming a demigod. Then again, you could just as easily have been recruited from a hive world full of daily extreme violence, and your gang was just forcibly made to participate in the trials, and you were simply the only one left alive at the end. So that's your flip side of the coin. Pray you never seek acceptance to the Grey Knights. I'll cover that later. Despite all the physical and mental requirements for candidacy, another element is spiritual purity. In the 41st millennium, Imperial society is heavily religious, worshipping the God Emperor, and most importantly, decrying the ruinous powers of chaos. Chaplains and the ecclesiarchy will continually monitor society around Astartes.
Spiritual purity, but didn't he just say they took some recruits off hive worlds that were like criminals and gang members? Are they pure still? Very interesting.
These recruitment sources to ensure that there are no signs of taint by the dark forces of chaos.
Chaos. Aspirants.
With the easy part over, the selected candidates, now known as aspirants, will begin the ritual process of becoming a Space Marine.
Ooh.
This may be a formal process of reciting scripture, or it could involve further trials. These could take place on the homeworld or result in immediate departure for the aspirant. Each chapter has their own private and guarded initiations. Some of these can be heavily traumatic and are usually significantly harder tests designed to break those who show even the smallest cracks of weakness. These trials for the young aspirants may even include ritual slaughter, scarification, even amputation and bloodletting. It's all designed to prove their commitment, loyalty and unwavering faith in the Astartes chapter. Unsurprisingly, some aspirants do not pass this phase of testing physically or mentally.
Wonder why.
Aspirants will continue periods of testing and examination as well as actual live combat during their period as a recruit for the Space Marine chapter. And some of these trials may be cleverly disguised as coming-of-age rituals, other celebrations some more combat-based. All, though, will be observed carefully by senior members of the chapter and chaplains who will be assessing key traits and behaviours, looking for candidates who fulfil their exacting requirements. Some of these aspirants from Fira worlds or even other worlds may not be truly aware of what Space Marines are, and this innocence may in some way protect them from making overthought errors that cost them later. Still, some chapters actually take little interest in these early stages and will only actually become involved later once aspirants have been further thinned down. The whole process is a physical and psychological minefield. Some challenges could be unachievable, while others the simple act of survival is enough to merit approval to progress to the next stage. All the tests put to Space Marine aspirants are designed to test every element of their being to the limit and expose any weaknesses that are present, as well as learn about how they handle and make judgments on situations they are presented with. While the recruitment age for these aspirants is undoubtedly young, it's worth remembering that the nightmare environment of the 41st millennium is undoubtedly very harsh, and so growing up and becoming an adult quickly is something which many learn to do, and so their age shouldn't necessarily dictate your judgment of them based on our current period in time.
A Harlequin.
Standard Astartes trials for these young recruits can include knowledge of self. Astartes look at recruits' mental strength equally to the physical. The horrors they will face in their lives as a Space Marine, despite later conditioning, require the strongest character in a recruit to be successful and worthy. They may use a chapter librarian to impose psychic horrors on a recruit to see if they survive the nightmares they are forced to witness. He may be forced to take drugs and face the worst parts of his own psyche. The stress and trauma of this trial can often physically affect their bodies as well, so in many ways this becomes the ultimate test for recruits. Completion of this trial will undoubtedly fundamentally alter the young recruit forever. Some chapters, like the Imperial Fists, consider this kind of mental testing especially important, but do so by exposing their recruits to literal physical pain, and we use devices like the subtly titled Pain Glove. These hook into the nervous system of the recruit and inflict horrific pain, but also maintain their consciousness well past what a normal individual could handle. The result will either be a mentally toughened but probably scarred individual, or a complete mental breakdown and death. An obvious and standard test for many recruits is exposure. Most worlds of the Imperium have unforgiving environments, and so sending out recruits into these wastes with little to survive with is an easy way to tell who is strong enough as a candidate. Space Marine apothecaries can rebuild damaged individuals, so the test is less of can you survive without consequences, and more simply, can you survive? Many worlds are severely irradiated, frozen wastes, toxic wastelands, or ashen wastes, where planets have suffered total ecological collapse. Alternately, a planet could also be a literal jungle full of horrific creatures, small and large, ready to tear you to pieces, or just melt your face off. As stated, the test is simple: survive for a set period of time. It will also likely involve some object of crossing a distance from A to B, so as to avoid recruits just digging a hole somewhere and sitting in it until time has elapsed.
Camping.
Some of the tests could well be impossible to complete and are simply assessing who can survive longest or travel furthest before dying or near death. The Ultramarines and Space Wolf chapters are known to favour exposure testing. A fairly self-explanatory trial, recruits are pitted against one another in one-on-one combat. When the last few remain, the assessing Astartes will usually halt the assessment. The type of duel could vary between armed or unarmed combat, consecutive combat, or recruits switching out on completing rounds. There is one constant though, and that is it's always a fight to the death. Again, apothecaries are able to heal most ordinary human wounds with ease, so these fights are often fairly no-holds-barred brutal affairs. Amputation and heavy trauma being the norm. Unsurprisingly, duels are the Blood Angels' trial of choice, but others such as Dark Angels, Imperial Fists and Space Wolves also put this trial to their recruits. War is life in the Imperium, and although some worlds know this more than others, planets used for recruitment usually have some form of regular combat going on. This trial is less a trial and more means of assessing potential candidates. Astartes may have observed headhunting particularly strong champions, or they may watch them from orbit, observing infighting between tribes on Imperial feral worlds. In this trial, recruits are tasked to head out into their homeworld and slay a beast for causing chaos or harm to their world. Many Imperial worlds host highly dangerous life forms or worse, orc infestations. The recruit must go out alone, or sometimes in small groups, and return with their captured hunt, often alive. With these group hunts though, the nasty twist is that there can only be one successful recruit, so they could turn on each other, break off alone to achieve or steal victory. I personally question the validity of this test. Fighting to the death to show strength over others seems plausible, but setting out in as a group, but then betraying other recruits seems to go kind of against the traits Astartes look for in recruits. Anyway, on returning home, they'll be required to slay their successful hunt in a ritual in front of their community before being led successfully away in the throes of glory. Lastly, the quite vague challenge trial. And this is exactly what it is, some form of probably unsurmountable challenge. This could be to attempt to fight a full-blown Space Marine in combat. An impossible task, you might imagine, but usually remember this is the 41st millennium and bizarre occurrences are abound. While the thought of a child fighting a Space Marine seems insane, remember the task is usually to see how they approach it, not necessarily their success.
If they can.
In some extremely rare situations though, the aspirant may actually beat the Space Marine challenger. As completely impossible as this may seem, that individual usually will hold some unusual or rare power and will go on to become a legendary hero of the chapter. The aspirant will also usually be armed, while the Space Marine unarmed and without his power armor. Still, as with most of the former trials, the test here is really about if they can just survive at all, not so much best their opponent. Other arguably more horrific tests though could be non-combat based and test a recruit's strength, speed, mental skill or resistance to toxins. So they might for example be forced to drink nightmarish toxic chemicals, lift weights so heavy they break their bones apart, or evade some kind of horrific dangerous trap. Recruits deemed to have succeeded by whatever standards, however unlikely, will then be restored by chapter apothecaries. Ultramarines and again Imperial Fists favour these trials. Clearly, a great many recruits will not survive this stage of assessment, but even...
So guys, what I'm getting out of this so far is they just break these kids. They break them mentally, physically, drug them, beat them up, light them on fire, heal them up, break them down again, beat them up again, heal them up, beat them, heal them, beat them, heal them. Yeah, I bet that's a lot of scar tissue. No wonder they become so hard. Let's keep going.
Those who fail to be accepted but by some miracle survive will usually be heavily respected for having done so, not just by their families and friends, but by the assessing Astartes. Having done no wrong but maybe just not made the cut, these surviving but unsuccessful aspirants who were assessed on their home world may return to their former communities, a rare occurrence. Or they may continue on to serve the chapter as a serf, a menial but loyal servant who takes personal care of, say, a Marine's armour and weaponry. Those returned to their homes are extremely few, but surprisingly are not perceived as failures. It would be made clear to all that having just survived, they have shown sheer strength and integrity as an Imperial citizen. They would then likely go on to become a strong leader for that world as Imperial Guard, Planetary Defense Force, or some other leadership.
The neophytes.
Successful aspirants will now become neophytes. They will move on to the next stage, where they'll begin the early stages of conversion to a full Space Marine with the initial implantation of the gene seed and chemical adaptation of their genetically enhanced organs. This could mean immediate departure with a Space Marine brother to the next phase, or it may be that they are allowed to celebrate in their home community before departure. A very huge moral boost for the Imperial community there, and also to help reinforce Imperial values and loyalty. To be able to say your community gained a successful Astartes recruit is no small thing, and statues, paintings, songs and stories will be told for many years, if not generations to come.
It better be.
Neophytes will be expected to engage in training for combat as well as other mental training, as well as following chapter lore. If a neophyte should break chapter lore through ignorance or unthinkably by deliberately doing so, they will expect severe punishments. A neophyte breaking chapter lore will not simply be thrown out, they would likely be mind scrubbed, live out their lives as either, best case scenario, chapter serfs, being menial servants, or worse, forcible amputation and body conversion to life as cybernetic drones and slaves as servitors.
I knew it.
Successful neophytes immediately will begin conditioning to be implanted with their gene seeds and relevant genetic enhancements. Space Marines must be male because the gene seed is only compatible with male hormones and genetics. So no, you won't see female Space Marines.
Very interesting.
The neophytes also need to be tested for compatibility. I'm always kind of surprised that this doesn't happen before the recruitment trials, but anyway, so they're tested for compatibility, otherwise as with organ transplants.
So, what... I agree right there. Why would they not do that first? Test to see if they're compatible. What happens if you get to the end and you've passed everything and you're not compatible with the gene seed? Are you just SOL? Or do they just, nope, no, sorry, the runner-up is now the Astartes. Please, I hope they go into deeper detail on that. That makes no sense.
Rejection would be fatal for the neophyte. Even with this testing, it can still happen later down the line. They will then further have their mental strength checked before implantation of the gene seed begins, to ensure that they are in no way compromised by the forces of chaos.
Okay. I was about to say, because they mentally compromised from all that tests.
If all these criteria are approved, the neophyte recruit will now become a Space Marine scout, or in some cases a full Space Marine initiate. They will live isolated in the Space Marine chapter's fortress monastery on the homeworld, save for any approved missions. The individual will be tutored on battle methods, tactics, psycho-conditioning, values, and the history of his chapter. The reason these early Marines are titled Initiates is because it is still unknown as to whether they will even survive to the final end process of becoming a full battle brother. 19 organs grown from the chapter gene seed will be implanted to the neophyte initiate. Some are transplants and others are grown in the trainee Marine's body. The gene seed will also adapt and change and grow the individual's body to become...
He said they implanted 19 more organs. He must be about to explain like how they get bigger, because I don't think 18 or 19 organs are gonna fit on top of everything you already got there, sir. Ew.
The giant size of a space marine, towering over ordinary mortal humans. Much of the body chemistry will be fundamentally reworked during this time, and the gene seed contains genetically engineered viral machines which rebuild the body to the template created by the Emperor. Any implant has a potential to fail, and this rejection will automatically end and probably kill the initiate. As if the odds weren't stacked against them already, this further thins down the number who survive to the end of this arduous process. In brief, the
Guys, for those of you that have watched Baki, the Son of Ogre, it kind of reminds me of Jack Hanma. I feel like Jack Hanma would be like a good Astartes. I mean, he beats himself up continuously by training to the point his body is broken, and then he still keeps going. And then he gets a copious amount of steroids and just goes at it, and he gets big. But then he loses the tournament and says, I need to be even bigger. So he goes to the doctor and says, hey, I need to grow a few inches. I need to be about 9 feet tall. And so they broke his bones and elongated him. Kind of sounds like what happened to a space marine, but not at the cellular level. This, I'm pretty sure he used like screws and pins, and I feel like that would hurt a whole lot more.
19 implanted or grown organs to become a full space marine are as follows. First, a secondary heart to increase blood supply and capacity. It can also pump steroids and extra adrenaline for battle situations. The os modular or iron heart. This strengthens and grows the skeleton of a space marine so that his bones will contain a ceramic-based mineral which is added to an initiate's diet. After a few years, the Space Marine skeleton will be exponentially stronger than a normal human. The rib cage will have become fused to a solid bone plate, providing extra protection for internal organs.
Where can
the
I get this
biscopia
calcium
is implanted within the chest cavity, and this increases skeletal muscular development, essentially muscle density. The hemastamen assists in carrying oxygen and nutrients more efficiently throughout the blood. It also assists in regulating the second and third implants. The Larraman's organ is also placed in the chest and manufactures synthetic Larraman cells. These serve like ordinary human blood platelets, but faster and more efficient. When a Space Marine is wounded, they form fully healed scar tissue in seconds, preventing hemorrhaging. This ability can make Space Marines appear invincible.
Now, guys, I did see exactly what he's talking about when we watched the Astartes. When the Space Marine was transported through the warp. The whole, not the warp, I don't think it's the warp. But when he got transported, he took his helmet off and started puking. Oh, you see his blood platelets. So, he's already started to heal. Very interesting, very interesting.
As they take wound after wound, anything other than the most catastrophic of injuries is going to leave them still standing. The catalepsian node is implanted in the back of the cerebrum. It allows Space Marines to avoid the need for sleep, entering them into a form of ongoing coma, allowing their brain the ability to systematically recharge by individual parts at a time. This enables them to stay on duty for hundreds of hours. The seventh implant is the Primaris. It functions as a decontamination chamber above the stomach and will analyze ingested materials, neutralizing any organic or inorganic toxins. It also enables Astartes to eat materials for sustenance that would kill ordinary humans. The homophagia is implanted in...
Now, God, I hate to keep stopping it, but I'm seeing so many similarities. Remember in the last part with Brickies, we were talking about the Space Marines and how they could not get drunk because their body detoxifies the poison so fast. So they have to drink some special ass kind of brew, some witch's potion, to even feel a little buzz. Well, I guess when you're a Space Marine, you don't really have any enjoyment in life other than duty, so why would you need to get drunk? I mean, especially if you don't sexually reproduce and you're just asexual, then what's the point? I don't know. Keep going.
In the upper spinal cord, it absorbs information through ingested DNA and RNA related to memories. The purpose is to gain tactical or survival information by eating animals or life forms indigenous on a planet. In addition to a second heart, cool. Space Marines also have multi-lungs as their 9th implant. 3 in fact. This is to give them extra oxygen absorption in thin air environments. In a toxic environment, their ordinary lungs are shut off to allow the 3rd lung to act as a filter for any necessary toxins. The 10th adaptation is the ocular lobe. It's a gene seed adaptation that enhances eyesight along the optic nerves. This gives increased accuracy of vision and increased low-light sight ability.
Oh, that'd be nice.
Lyman's ear is not simply better for more accurate hearing. It enables Marines to resist ordinary human dizziness and for them to be able to filter out white noise and sonic attacks. The Sasan membrane allows a Space Marine to enter a state of suspended animation. This can enable mortally wounded Marines to survive until help or an apothecary's arrival. This hibernation period has been known to be able to last for anything as long as half a century. Melanochrome alters the pigments in the skin cells, allowing Astartes to shield himself from dangerous radiation and heat. Different levels of this in effect can cause physical differences between chapters, such as the very pale skin of the Blood Angels or the darker skin of the Salamanders. The oolitic kidney filters blood to further remove toxins that have been ingested in combination with the 7th organ. It is best not to think of this though like an ordinary kidney, as this organ functions to assist in removing toxins before they have passed through any normal process of absorption. Otherwise, it wouldn't be very useful. It also helps to regulate the advanced circulatory system and other organs. The neuroglottis in the mouth allows a Marine to biochemically analyze things by taste or smell, or determine if something is poisonous or safe. Despite their advanced organs, this could still be very useful for a variety of purposes, and it can also enable them to track targets, much like a canine. The muconoid is implanted in the nervous system and, if activated through an external treatment, will cause the Astartes skin to secrete a waxy substance. This will cocoon them to protect them in situations of extended suspended animation, even the vacuum of space or other temperature extremes. The Betcher's gland consists of 2 glands implanted in the mouth. These allow the Astartes to use their saliva as a corrosive acid when consciously activated. This could enable them to corrode bars if they were held captive or remove doors from their hinges. It also can assist them in eating difficult to break down substances.
So, you're telling me that they can survive the vacuum of space by secreting some waxy substance that cocoons their body. And not only that, they have acid spit when they want to turn it on. What are these guys? They definitely ain't human. I guess they Space Marines.
Some Marine chapters have found that this organ no longer functions or has become less effective over time. The progenoid glands, or the gene seeds, are the critical organs of a Space Marine. They're implanted into the neck and chest cavity and serve as reproductive glands to allow their DNA to be collected upon death and safeguard the continuity of the chapter. Apothecaries of a Space Marine chapter will cultivate germ cells from the progenoid glands to create the 19 organs of a Space Marine, or some of them, because some are grown within the Space Marine themselves. The final organ is the black carapace, otherwise called the interface. This material is implanted under the skin of the chest with the now shell-like ribcage. Fibred bundles then grow inward and interlink with the Space Marine's nervous system. Points for these bundles are pre-cut by apothecaries and form neural connection points. The function of these are to allow a Space Marine to interface with the heavy power armour, or as some would have you believe, the armour's machine spirit. These connections enables faster reaction and manoeuvrability. Without this, Space Marines would lumber around very much encumbered by the heavy armour they wear. It's worth remembering that this whole process probably sounds heavily traumatic, but consider that it ideally happens when the young neophyte or initiates between the ages of about 10 to 12 years old and should be then completed by age 18. Many are going to suffer critical or multiple organ failure during the process. The penalty, or arguably mercy for this, is usually euthanasia, although conversion to a servitor for the chapter is sometimes an option depending on chapters and their needs. Again, for those families who never see their sons again, in some cases it's probably for the best. All they need to know is he's serving the Imperium. Now, more recently, since the involvement of Belisarius' Call of the Mechanicum, Primaris Marines are a new breed of superhuman Astartes. Under instruction from Robert Guilliman, Primaris Astartes are only created from the gene seeds of loyalist Primarchs. They contain 3 additional organs, and their gene seed is considerably more genetically stable. Guilliman had instructed Call to develop these new organs with the goal of creating the Primaris, and their additional organs are the sinew coils. This enables the sinew of a Primaris Astartes to be durametallic, contracting with immense force, gifting them extreme strength and his body further resilience. This increased strength will literally enable them to crush the skulls of their enemies with bare hands. The magnifact, and this small lobe is inserted to the brain cortex. It secretes a hormone to increase the body's growth functions, with the goal of also intensifying further functions of the other implanted organs. Apparently, this organ is in fact half of the immortis gland, the god-maker gland of the Primarchs. For undisclosed reasons, Call was only able to discover the right half of this gland, not the full gland itself. The left half had been fully eradicated from Imperial records by either the Emperor himself or others unknown. And third, the Belisarian furnace. This organ lies dormant and connects to both a Marine's hearts. In times of immense physical stresses, it expels chemicals simulating combat stimulants, increasing the regrowth of tissue, bone and muscle. This is a short-term use organ and requires time to recharge after using. Now, if this incredibly harrowing physical conversion is successful, the neophyte or initiate will have completed the arguably most challenging part of his transformation. However, during these changes, they will still be undergoing some of the most challenging training and assessment regimes humanity had ever known. Psychological and physical conditioning, subconscious therapy, and endless live battle training sessions. Their senses and mental abilities far exceed ordinary humans by the end of this process. Their mental toughness is beyond measure, and an Astartes will essentially ignore pain and environmental conditions. An Astartes will assault enemies who, to simply look upon, would make an ordinary human suffer a complete mental break. Many, through endless conditioning, will develop photographic memories. Much of this round-the-clock therapy will also neutralize any latent character flaws and create stable, highly single-minded warriors. This endless mental and physical indoctrination will also teach and reinforce high respect for authority and to expertly carry out orders. With that said, it's important to remember that Space Marines are not mindless drones or clones. They are individuals, and while always following the rule of command, if a situation warrants it, they are entirely capable of disobeying orders if they believe it to be ultimately necessary. The consequences for this, though, could be, and usually are, potentially highly severe. At the end of this process, the few successful young children who are pitted against one another and survive the ordeals to reach this point will be welcomed as successful young initiates, becoming full Space Marine battle brothers, Imperial Astartes, the greatest warriors in the galaxy. Astartes' aging, though, does seem somewhat random, with some living even as long as 10,000 years. But given the fractured and strange nature of time in the 41st millennium, it can be really hard to put accurate expectancies on this, and many Marines who are not killed may reach at least half a century in age. It's no exaggeration to state that on successfully becoming an Astartes, these men would be far from what you would recognise as human. Their extended lives and nearly unbreakable bodies are truly no prize. Their lives from this point on are spent in the sole act of defending humanity and the Imperium of Man. Accepting that their lives will be lost in battle at some point in the future, probably in horrific circumstances, they'll never see anyone they had ever known in their lives again. Families, friends will die far before they even begin to think of such things. Space Marines are the protectors. Humanity in the 41st millennium stands on a precipice. We've known many horrors, disasters, and catastrophes, the ending of many worlds, but the next millennia will be the most critical. Threats surround humanity, some still difficult to gauge just how severe and if we can resist them. Our hope is in the Astartes, and the Imperium of Man, and the Emperor. With the Primarch rulebook Guilliman returned, there is a glimmer of hope in the darkness.
Alrighty guys, wow, so Space Marines. I had no inkling of what these kids had to go through, these boys had to go through to actually become a Space Marine. I mean, honestly, I don't know how I would feel at 10 to 12 years old. Are they given like a false sense of what this is? I mean, obviously, yeah, I want to get the award. I want to be the ultimate protector of the Imperium. But do they know what they have to go through before they're chosen? I mean, imagine 10 to 12. You get chosen. You're the hurrah of your hometown, your home world, and then they ship you off. They beat you mentally and physically. Break you down mentally and physically, drug you, make you fight, heal you, make you fight your teammates, make you go on missions with your teammates to catch a beast, and then bring that beast back. But there can only be one victor, so you have to turn on your teammates, which is ultimately counterintuitive to what, I mean, a good team would be. And why are we turning on our teammates? That makes no sense. Also, why do we not test the gene seed compatibility beforehand? But like, yeah, let's test it before we ship them off and make them go through all that crap. Nah, we're gonna wait until you get to the very end. You are the champion. Oh, but sorry, this isn't gonna be compatible with you. So sorry. Now, guys, what does happen in that situation? Does the second place become the Space Marine? I don't know. Somebody please answer that. And also, guys, another question. He said that Space Marines can live like half a century. Now, understanding, Space Marines, they're going into battle a lot. So, ultimately, 50 is a long time for them anyway. But he also said up to 10,000 years. Now, is he talking about in that stasis mode that they can go into? Or is that just if they don't die in battle, they can live that long? Somebody, please answer these questions for me. I need to know. That is an old freaking dude. Still badass, but still old. Ugh, Space Marines. God, it's blowing my mind. Wow, guys, but with that is going to be the end of the video for tonight. Thank y'all for being here with me, guys. Thank you for sitting back and taking some time out of your day to enjoy some videos with me. Now, before you head out the door, guys, please go ahead and like and subscribe. That helped me out tremendously. We're so close to 1,000. Let's get there together. So, guys, with that, peace, love, happiness to you. Hope you have a blessed rest of your day. And always, guys, be easy.